Frederick thought his wife was just a pathetic, overweight couch potato weighing down his glorious, self-made life. He spent years treating her like dirt, planning to leave her with absolutely nothing. But when the divorce papers finally landed, Frederick discovered a terrifying truth. The useless woman he despised actually owned his entire existence. Frederick Sterling adjusted the knot of his silk Tom Ford tie in the hallway mirror, admiring the sharp lines of his jaw and the tailored fit of his bespoke charcoal suit. At 42, he was in the prime of his life. He was the founding partner of Sterling and Hastings Asset Management, a man who commanded boardrooms, drove a slate-grey Porsche 911, and had a 28-year-old PR director named Chloe Simmons, keeping his bed warm on business trips. Then his gaze drifted to the reflection in the background. Sitting at the kitchen island was his wife, Beatrice. She was wearing a faded, oversized beige cardigan that did nothing to hide her heavy-set frame. Beatrice had always been a larger woman, but in the 15 years they had been married, Frederick felt she had completely let herself go. As she quietly buttered a piece of toast, completely absorbed in a gardening catalogue, Frederick felt a familiar wave of intense, suffocating resentment. "Are you wearing that outside?" Frederick asked, his voice dripping with casual cruelty. Beatrice looked up, her soft brown eyes blinking behind tortoise-shell glasses. "I'm just going to the nursery today, Frederick, to look at some hydrangeas." "Right. The nursery," he scoffed, grabbing his leather briefcase. "God forbid you see the inside of a gym. Try not to eat the entire bakery section at Whole Foods on your way back. Some of us actually have to work to maintain our lifestyle." Beatrice didn't flinch. She just lowered her eyes back to the catalogue. "Have a good day at the firm, Frederick." To Frederick, Beatrice was a parasite. She was dead weight. He had convinced himself years ago that he was a self-made titan of industry, a financial genius who had pulled himself up by his bootstraps. When he founded his firm in his late 20s, he had struggled, until a sudden injection of capital from a blind angel investment group, Oakmont Financial, had catapulted him into the big leagues. From that moment on, Frederick had never looked back. He considered himself a master of the universe. And in his universe, Beatrice didn't fit the aesthetic. He didn't invite her to corporate galas anymore. He made sure she was excluded from the high-end weekend retreats he took with his partner, Gregory Hastings. He openly mocked her weight to his friends. "She's a human anchor." He would laugh over expensive scotch at the country club. "I buy her a Peloton. She uses it to hang her oversized sweaters. I'm telling you, Greg, I'm suffocating." And then there was Chloe. Chloe was everything Beatrice was not. She was ruthless, blonde, obsessed with Pilates, and looked incredible on Frederick's arm. For the past 18 months, Frederick and Chloe had been carelessly parading their affair in front of anyone who mattered, knowing Beatrice was too socially isolated, and in Frederick's mind, too stupid to ever find out. The breaking point arrived on a Friday evening during a rare dinner party hosted at the Sterling residence. Frederick had been forced to invite several key clients, along with Gregory and Chloe. Beatrice had spent 3 days preparing the menu, cooking everything from scratch. As she brought out the main course, her face flushed from the heat of the oven, she moved to take an empty seat at the head of the table. Frederick held up a hand, a smirk playing on his lips. "Ah, B, maybe take the reinforced chair from the study? These antiques are fragile, and we wouldn't want a structural collapse ruining the roast." The dining room went dead silent. Gregory cleared his throat awkwardly. Chloe let out a sharp, poorly concealed snort of laughter. Beatrice froze. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped the back of the antique chair. For a brief second, something dark and incredibly sharp flashed in her eyes, a look Frederick had never seen before. but it vanished instantly. She released the chair, offered a tight, polite smile to the guests, and quietly excused herself to the kitchen. She did not return for the rest of the night. That evening, as Frederick smoked a cigar on the patio with Gregory, he made his decision. "I'm done." Frederick exhaled, a cloud of smoke drifting into the night air. "I'm cutting her loose. She's an embarrassment." "Divorce?" Gregory asked, looking nervous. "Frederick, be careful. You've been married 15 years. Without a prenup, she's entitled to half of everything. The house, the cars, the firm." Frederick laughed, a cold, arrogant sound. "Half?" "Greg, please. She doesn't know a checking account from a mutual fund. I've already spent the last 6 months quietly funneling the liquid assets into offshore shell companies in the Caymans under Chloe's brother's name. By the time I serve her, the accounts will look dry. I'll offer her a modest alimony to keep her quiet, and she'll take it because she's terrified of the real world. She has nothing without me." What Frederick didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have fathomed in his supreme arrogance, was that as he stood on the patio plotting her ruin, Beatrice was sitting in her home office. She wasn't crying. She wasn't eating. She was on a private, encrypted line with a team of corporate litigators in Geneva, calmly authorizing a series of catastrophic financial triggers. A month later, on a crisp Tuesday morning, Frederick dropped the bomb. He walked into the kitchen wearing a perfectly pressed navy suit and tossed a thick manila envelope onto the marble island. Beatrice was sipping her morning tea, a plate of sliced fruit in front of her. "I'll make this quick, Beatrice," Frederick said, his tone devoid of any emotion. "I'm filing for divorce. Those are the papers. My lawyer, Harrison Cole, has drawn up a very fair settlement. You'll get $3,000 a month in alimony, and I'll let you keep the Honda. But I'm keeping this house, and I'm keeping the firm." Beatrice didn't open the envelope. She just looked at it, then took a slow sip of her tea. "Don't try to fight me on this," Frederick sneered, leaning over the counter to intimidate her. "If you try to take me to court, I will bury you. I've already secured my assets. The accounts are tied up. You'll bankrupt yourself trying to pay legal fees. Just sign the papers, pack your bags, and leave quietly. You can go live with your sister in Ohio." Beatrice set her teacup down. The porcelain clinked softly against the saucer. She looked up at Frederick, and for the first time, he noticed she wasn't cowering. There were no tears pooling in her eyes. Her expression was utterly serene, almost bored. "Okay, Frederick," she said softly. "I won't sign these, of course, but we can have our lawyers meet tomorrow." Frederick rolled his eyes. "Suit yourself. Don't say I didn't warn you." The next afternoon, Frederick sat in the glass-walled conference room of Harrison Cole's elite downtown law firm. Harrison was a shark, a man known for aggressively dismantling spouses in high-net-worth divorces. Frederick checked his Rolex, grinning confidently. He couldn't wait to see the cheap, strip mall attorney Beatrice would inevitably drag into the room. At exactly 2 p.m., the heavy glass doors opened. Beatrice walked in. She wasn't wearing her usual oversized cardigans or faded jeans. She was dressed in a meticulously tailored, exceptionally expensive charcoal grey pantsuit that commanded authority despite her size. Her hair was swept back elegantly, and she wore a string of authentic South Sea pearls. But it wasn't Beatrice's appearance that made Frederick's smug smile falter. It was the man walking beside her. He wasn't a cheap divorce lawyer. It was Samuel Whitmore. Frederick felt the blood drain from his face. Samuel Whitmore was one of the most feared corporate trust litigators on the Eastern Seaboard. He was the kind of lawyer billionaires hired when they needed to dismantle Fortune 500 companies. What the hell was he doing with Beatrice? "Mr. Sterling," Samuel said, in a gravelly, aristocratic voice as he set a slim, leather briefcase on the mahogany table. "Mr. Cole, thank you for accommodating us on such short notice." Harrison Cole looked completely thrown off guard. "Mr. Whitmore, I wasn't aware you handled family law." "I don't," Samuel replied smoothly, taking a seat beside Beatrice, who sat with perfect posture, her hands folded neatly on the table. "I handle corporate restructuring and wealth management, which is precisely why Mrs. Sterling asked me to accompany her today." Frederick leaned forward, trying to mask his sudden panic with aggression. "Listen to me, B. If you think bringing some high-priced corporate suit is going to scare me, you're delusional. I told you, my assets are insulated. You're getting the alimony, and that's it." Beatrice just smiled, a chilling, genuinely amused smile. Samuel Whitmore unlatched his briefcase. "Mr. Sterling, it appears there is a fundamental misunderstanding regarding the nature of your assets. Specifically, your assumption that you own Sterling and Hastings Asset Management." Frederick barked a laugh. "I am the founder and majority shareholder. I own 80% of the equity. Gregory owns 20. My name is on the door." "Your name is on the door, yes," Samuel said, sliding a thick, beautifully bound legal document across the table toward Frederick and his lawyer. "But your 80% equity was never fully vested. When you founded the firm 15 years ago, you received a substantial seed investment from a blind venture capital group called Oakmont Financial." "So what?" Frederick snapped, his heart beginning to hammer against his ribs. "They were an angel investor. We paid off their initial seed note a decade ago." "You paid off the debt," Samuel corrected gently. "You did not read the fine print of the preferred shareholder agreement. Oakmont Financial did not just provide a loan, Mr. Sterling. They purchased 90% of the voting rights of your holding company. You and Mr. Hastings merely retain Class B non-voting shares. You operate the company, yes, but Oakmont Financial owns it." Harrison Cole frantically flipped through the document, his eyes widening in horror as he read the clauses. "Frederick, he's right. The operating agreement. The voting shares are held entirely by the Oakmont Trust." Frederick felt the room spinning. "Okay, fine. So some faceless trust owns the voting shares. What does that have to do with my divorce? I still take home 7 figures a year. I'm the CEO." Beatrice finally spoke. Her voice was velvet over steel. "Oakmont isn't a faceless trust, Frederick," she said softly. Frederick stared at her, uncomprehending. "Oakmont Financial is a private holding company established by my late grandfather, Arthur Miller," Beatrice continued, her eyes locking onto his. "He set it up for me before he died. When we got married, and you were crying yourself to sleep because no bank would loan you a dime for your little start-up, I felt sorry for you. So, I instructed my trust managers to act as your anonymous angel investor." The silence in the room was absolute. Frederick felt as though the floor had vanished beneath his feet. "You?" Frederick whispered, his voice trembling. "You're Oakmont." "I am the sole beneficiary and controlling director of the Oakmont Trust," Beatrice said, leaning back in her chair. "Which means, Frederick, I own 90% of your company. I own the building your office is in. I own the proprietary software you use to trade. In fact, technically, I am your employer." "That's a lie," Frederick shouted, slamming his hand on the table, desperate to regain control. "Even if you do, I've moved my personal money. I have millions saved. You can't touch it." Samuel Whitmore sighed, looking at Frederick with pity. "Mr. Sterling, did you really think you could wire $5 million to shell companies in the Cayman Islands without the majority shareholder of your firm noticing. As per the corporate charter, any executive transfer over $100,000 must be cleared by the board. Which is me, Beatrice added cheerfully. We flagged the transfers, Samuel explained. We allowed them to process to offshore accounts, which technically violated your fiduciary duty and constitutes corporate embezzlement. Yesterday morning we filed an injunction. The Cayman accounts have been frozen by international authorities. Your personal checking accounts have been frozen. And as of 9 a.m. today, you have been terminated from Sterling and Hastings for cause. Frederick couldn't breathe. He looked at his shark lawyer, Harrison Cole, expecting him to fight back, to find a loophole. But Harrison was pale, staring at the documents like they were a death warrant. She has you, Frederick, Harrison muttered, closing the folder. She has everything. Frederick stumbled out of the polished glass doors of Harrison Cole's law firm and onto the bustling Manhattan pavement, the heavy afternoon heat hitting him like a physical blow. His chest was incredibly tight, his breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. The noise of the traffic, the sirens, the chatter of pedestrians, it all blurred together into a deafening roar. He needed a drink. He needed to think. He staggered into an upscale hotel bar 2 blocks down, practically collapsing onto a leather stool. His hands were shaking so violently he could barely unbutton his suit jacket. "Macallan 25, he choked out to the bartender. "Neat. Leave the bottle." As the amber liquid burned down his throat, Frederick pulled out his phone. His mind raced, desperately searching for a lifeline. This is a bluff, he told himself. It has to be a bluff. Beatrice is a gardener. She bakes pies. She doesn't orchestrate multinational corporate takeovers. He opened his banking app, fully expecting to see the comforting 8-figure balance in his private wealth management account. Error, account 4099 suspended. Please contact your branch administrator. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He toggled to his offshore routing app. The screen flashed red. Access denied. "Sir?" The bartender was standing in front of him, holding a small black leather book. "That'll be $340 for the pause." Frederick pulled his sleek, metal Centurion American Express card from his wallet and tossed it onto the bar with a practiced flick of his wrist. "Keep it open." A minute later, the bartender returned, looking distinctly unimpressed. "It declined, sir." "Run it again," Frederick snapped, his voice cracking. "It's a black card. There is no limit." "I ran it 3 times. The terminal says the account has been seized by the issuing institution. Do you have another form of payment?" Humiliation flushed through Frederick's cheeks as several patrons at the bar turned to look at him. He fumbled in his pocket, realizing he had exactly $40 in cash. He threw it on the bar, grabbed his briefcase, and practically sprinted out of the hotel, leaving the bartender shouting behind him. Panic had fully set in. He hailed a cab, promising the driver a gold watch as collateral if he hurried, and sped toward the headquarters of Sterling and Hastings. If he could just get to his office, access his encrypted hard drives, and talk to Gregory, they could figure this out. Gregory was a bulldog. Together, they could fight Beatrice and her shark lawyer. The cab pulled up to the towering glass skyscraper that housed the firm. Frederick shoved past the revolving doors and marched toward the private elevator banks. "Mr. Sterling," a voice rumbled. Frederick stopped. Standing in front of the elevator was the building's head of security, a towering man named Peterson, flanked by 2 other guards. In Peterson's hands was a cardboard banker's box. Sitting on top of a pile of office supplies was a framed photograph of Frederick shaking hands with the mayor. "What is this, Peterson?" Frederick demanded, trying to push past him. "Get out of my way." "I'm sorry, Frederick," Peterson said, stepping into his path. His tone wasn't malicious, just firm. Your keycard has been deactivated. I have strict orders from the new board of directors not to let you upstairs. We packed your personal effects." "The board?" Frederick practically screamed. "I am the board. Get Gregory Hastings on the phone right now." "That won't be necessary," a voice echoed across the marble lobby. Frederick whipped around. Gregory Hastings was walking toward him, flanked by 2 junior partners. Gregory looked immaculate, wearing a smug, practiced expression of professional concern. "Greg!" Frederick lunged forward, grabbing his partner's arm. "Thank God. Listen to me. Beatrice has lost her mind. She hired Samuel Whitmore, and they're claiming she owns Oakmont. We need to file a counter-injunction. We need to—" Gregory gently but firmly peeled Frederick's fingers off his suit sleeve. "I know who she hired, Frederick," Gregory said quietly. "She called me yesterday." Frederick froze. She called you." "She offered me the position of Chief Executive Officer," Gregory said, adjusting his cuffs, "with a significant bump in my Class A voting shares, provided I sign an affidavit confirming your attempts to wire firm capital to offshore shell companies, which, of course, I did. You were stealing from the firm, Frederick. My hands are tied." "You backstabbing coward," Frederick roared, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. He lunged at Gregory, but Peterson and the other guards caught him instantly, pinning his arms to his sides. "Escort him off the premises," Gregory told the guards, turning his back on his former partner. "If he comes back, call the police." Frederick was unceremoniously shoved through the front doors, stumbling onto the sidewalk with his cardboard box, clattering to the ground. His framed photo shattered on the concrete. He was entirely alone. He had one last sanctuary. Chloe. He left the box on the street and took the subway, sneaking through the turnstile like a teenager because he had no money, to the Upper East Side. He ran the 6 blocks to Chloe's luxury apartment building, the penthouse suite he paid $12,000 a month for. He bypassed the doorman and rode the elevator up, his heart hammering in his chest. When he burst through the front door, he expected to find Chloe doing yoga or mixing a green juice. Instead, he found the apartment in utter chaos. Designer clothes were strewn across the floor. 3 large Louis Vuitton suitcases were packed by the door. Chloe was frantically stuffing expensive jewelry into a velvet travel case. "Chloe, baby," Frederick gasped, leaning against the doorframe, out of breath. "Thank God you're here. We have a massive problem." "Beatrice." Chloe snapped her head up. Her perfectly manicured face was twisted into a snarl. "You have a problem, Frederick? My brother just called me crying from a detention center in Miami. The FBI showed up at his house an hour ago, asking about wire fraud and corporate embezzlement." Frederick swallowed hard. Okay, listen to me. It's a misunderstanding. Beatrice is freezing the assets, but I know how to beat her. I just need to lay low here for a few days, and I need you to float me some cash from the joint checking account until I can get a new lawyer." Chloe let out a sharp, incredulous laugh that echoed off the high ceilings. "Float you cash? Are you deaf, Frederick? Your psychotic wife froze everything. The joint account is locked. The rent check for this place bounced this morning. You're radioactive." "Chloe, please," Frederick begged, taking a step toward her. He reached out to touch her arm, but she recoiled as if he were diseased. "I love you. We were going to build a life together." "I liked the lifestyle, Frederick," Chloe spat, zipping up her jewelry case. "I liked the Hamptons. I liked the private jets. I do not like federal investigations, and I certainly do not like broke, middle-aged men who are too stupid to know who actually signs their paychecks." She grabbed her designer coat and walked right past him to the door. "My new boyfriend is picking me up. Leave the keys on the counter, and don't ever contact me or my brother again, or I'll testify against you myself." The heavy oak door slammed shut. The silence in the penthouse was deafening. Frederick sank slowly to his knees on the imported Persian rug, the realization finally crashing over him like a tidal wave. He had absolutely nothing. 4 months later. The rain drummed heavily against the stained glass windows of the Manhattan Family Court building. Frederick sat in the sterile hallway, wearing a suit he had bought off the rack at a discount department store. It didn't fit right. His cheeks were hollow, his hair unkempt, and the dark circles under his eyes spoke of sleepless nights spent in the squalid, roach-infested studio apartment he had been forced to rent in Queens. He was working as a junior financial analyst at a mid-level accounting firm in New Jersey, making a fraction of what he used to spend on wine in a single month. No major firm in the city would touch him after the embezzlement allegations, which Beatrice had graciously agreed not to press criminal charges on, provided he surrendered completely in the divorce. The heavy wooden doors of the courtroom swung open. Beatrice walked out. Frederick stared. She had not lost weight. She was still the same heavy-set woman she had always been, but everything else had fundamentally shifted. She radiated a quiet, terrifying power. She wore a bespoke emerald green coat over a tailored black dress, her hair impeccably styled, her posture flawlessly straight. She looked like a CEO. She looked like an empress. Beside her walked Samuel Whitmore, carrying a signed stack of documents. "It's finalized," Samuel said, as he approached Frederick's incredibly cheap, state-appointed lawyer. "The judge signed the decree. The marriage is dissolved." Frederick slowly stood up. His legs felt like lead. He looked at Beatrice, searching her soft brown eyes for any trace of the meek, gardening-obsessed woman he had tormented for 15 years. There was none. Only a cool, clinical detachment. "Why didn't you just tell me?" Frederick croaked, his voice raw. "If I had known you had the money, if I had known you were Oakmont, we could have been an empire together. Why let me treat you like that?" Beatrice paused. She motioned for Samuel to give them a moment, and the lawyer stepped back respectfully. "When we met, Frederick, you had nothing but ambition," Beatrice said, her voice calm and even. "I loved you. I wanted to see you succeed. But my grandfather warned me about men like you. He told me that money doesn't change a man, it unmasks him. So I gave you the money anonymously to see who you really were beneath the struggle." She stepped closer, the faint scent of expensive gardenias wrapping around him. "For a while you were just arrogant. I could live with that," she continued. "But then you became cruel. You mocked my weight. You humiliated me in front of our friends. You paraded that foolish girl around the city, thinking I was too blind or too stupid to notice. And then you tried to steal from the very foundation I built for you." Frederick looked down at his scuffed shoes, tears of profound, useless regret stinging his eyes. "I'm sorry, Bea. I am so sorry." "I know you are," Beatrice said smoothly. "But you're not sorry for what you did to me. You're just sorry you lost." She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a small metallic object. She held it out to him. It was a single car key. "As per the settlement," Beatrice said, dropping the key into his trembling palm. "You get to keep the Honda. I suggest you move it from the firm's parking garage by tomorrow morning, or I'll have Peterson tow it." She didn't wait for a response. Beatrice turned on her heel, the emerald fabric of her coat sweeping behind her, and walked down the marble corridor alongside her attorney. Frederick stood entirely alone in the dim hallway, clutching the key to a 10-year-old sedan, watching the woman he had treated like nothing walk away with absolutely everything. Frederick's downfall is a stark reminder that arrogance is a fragile fortress. He equated Beatrice's quiet demeanor and physical appearance with weakness, never realizing her silence was simply the patience of a predator observing its prey. In his greedy pursuit of a superficial life, he dismantled his own empire from the inside out. Ultimately, Frederick learned the hardest lesson of all. Never underestimate the architect of your success.